This is our 7th unit in Masechet Bava. This video will introduce all the things that we need to know and give an overview of the unit before we actually learn the text of the Gemara itself. First things first, please take out your Gemara and mark off this unit so you know where it is. Unit 7 begins line 19, where it says Nitkaven Lazarok Shtayim, and it goes down to line, well, that's 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, to line 24. So it's a short unit, 19 through 24, similar to our previous unit. So again, begins line 19, Nitkaven Lazarok Shtayim Mizarok Arba, goes down to line 24, please mark it off in your Gemara. Before we move on to our unit itself, we'll do a quick review of the last two units, just the information, because all three of them are connected. What we've been seeing is our situation scenarios brought up by Bava that are supposed to represent, certain ways that people have to act in certain situations. They know, they don't know, whatever it may be. So Unit 5 taught us Bava's first situation, which is a person with a rock on his lap that has no idea about it. They stand up, the person stands up, the rock rolls off and does some damage. This situation be an example of what happens when a person acts without knowing the situation at hand. Again, in this case, the rock rolled off the person's lap, the person had no idea. So now we want to know what happens in all situations like that. That's really what Bava is bringing up here. So remember, we had Le'inyan, 5 different areas of halacha, damages, the other 4 things that come along when you damage somebody. The laws of Shabbat, the laws what happens when you kill somebody by accident, you go to Galut. So what happens if I killed someone by accident, but I didn't know what the situation was at all? What happens with my Eved? If I injure my Eved, he's allowed to go free. What if I injured him without knowing the situation? Right? So that's what we discuss in all these. And again, depending on what the depending on the area of halacha, the verdict in each case, what the halacha should be, was different. When it came to damages, you were chayav. When it came to arba dvarim, you were patur. When it came to Shabbat, you were patur. When it came to galut, you were patur. When it came to eved, we had a machloket. The ideas that we included were adam muad lolam, person's always responsible for their damage. We have malachet machshevet, which is the fact that you have to do malacha in a normal way. If you don't know what you're doing, that's not malacha in a normal way for Shabbat, so you're not chayav, etc., etc. Same thing with Unit 6. We had a similar scenario, but not exactly. The second scenario brought up by Bava, if a person knows they have the rock on their lap, but then they forget. Then again, they stand up, the rock rolls off, and it does damage. Again, this being an example of what happens if a person knows the situation then forgets what's going on, right? Really shogeg, shagaga. So that's a little bit different than the situation before. The situation before, the person had no idea. Here the person has an idea, they just forget. And therefore we saw that, again, we have the same 5 areas of halacha, and we saw in general things were the same. The only difference was galut. In this case, you were chayav, you had to go to galut, because in this case was real shogeg. True shogeg, accident, or the word shogeg is where you know what happens, you just, something, you have a lapse, you make a mistake. As opposed to the previous case was ones. The previous case was where it was totally out of your control. This was real shogeg, and therefore you go to ir miklat. You have to go. As opposed to in the previous case, since it was totally out of your control, it's not held against you at all. You don't even have to go to ir miklat. Our Gemara is going to bring up a third scenario, as opposed to the second scenario here where the person forgets. The first scenario, they had no idea. We're going to see a third scenario. Before we do that, there's some information that we need to learn to help us understand this new topic, this new scenario, and what the halachot are going to be. So now actually would be a good time to take a pause, look at this slide, look at the previous slide, check out the charts, make sure you remember what's going on, take a minute to think about it, go to make sure that you marked off the unit in the Gemara, and then we will move on. Okay, the first fact that you need to know going into this Gemara has to do with malacha on Shabbat. As you may or may not know, there are 39 malachot, 39 areas of halacha, categories of things you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, like cooking, bishul, bona, which is building, zorea, which is planting. There are 39 categories of things you can't do on Shabbat. One of them is called hotza'ah. Hotza'ah means transferring an item, transporting an item. Based on this malacha, you are not allowed to carry an item in Reshut Harabim in a public place, And if you do, you actually violate Shabbat. It's one of the, it's an interesting malacha in that you're actually punished, and you're actually not allowed to do something which is completely not really constructive. You're not actually creating anything, you're not building anything, you're not growing anything. All you're doing is carrying anything. It's called hotza'ah. At the end of the day, you're not allowed to carry something in a public domain. Again, what defines something as a public domain? There are a lot of halachot about that we're not going to get into. One thing you need to know is that besides the halacha itself, okay, there's also what's called a shiur, an amount, and that is 4 amot. Okay, an amma is an old ancient Hebrew biblical measurement, which is about, according to different opinions on it, it's around 1.5 feet. So 4 amot would be about 6 feet. So again, you have the act, which is transporting. It's taking an object from one place to another. And then you have what's known as the shiur. The shiur is the amount. Okay? And that is 4 amot. So in order to violate this malacha, you have to carry something 4 amot in Reshut Harabim. And again, if you're familiar with what an Eruv is, an Eruv has something to do with this malacha. Again, not for now. All you need to know at this point is that if I carry this object 4 amot, which is about 6 feet, then I violate the malacha on Shabbat. And if I carry it less, even if it's just simply, 3 amot, if it's 5 feet, whatever it may be, then I did not violate the malacha d'oraita, or at least I'm not getting punished for it d'oraita. The second piece of background information that we need to know is another pasuk that's related to Ir Miklat. This is a pasuk in Sefer Shemot. It's describing murder, and it's describing when a person does and does not go to Ir Miklat. The pasuk says, "Makei ish v'meit mot yumat." If someone kills another, they should surely be put together. That's the lashon mot yumat, the double lashon. Va'asher lo tzeidah. But if this person did not plan to kill, right? Asher lo tzeidah, there was no plan. There was some godly act, whatever it is. It seems like it happened, that God caused this to happen. Okay, it's something that happened out of His control. Then I have made a place for this person to escape to. So again, when does a person escape to Ir Miklat? When is it considered to be they killed by accident? They go to Ir Miklat. Va'asher lo tzeidah. If this person did not plan, they didn't plan to do the murder. So what we'll see here is that it's a very specific definition that the Torah is giving us. Asher lo tzeidah. If you planned, you can't go to Ir Miklat. You're a murderer. If you did not plan this murder, right? Well, I shouldn't say if you did not plan this, what you did, then you do go to Ir Miklat. The question we're going to ask ourselves is, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? If he didn't plan. He didn't plan what? That is going to be important when we get into our Gemara. But the important thing to know right now is that the pasuk phrases the ability to go to Ir Miklat, to escape to Ir Miklat, someone who kills without planning. At this point, you should turn to page 3 of your notes and do the thinking assignment that goes along with this source over here about Ir Miklat, and then come back to the video to move on to seeing the overview of the Gemara itself. Okay, now we're going to take a quick look at the structure of the Gemara. It's very similar to the two that we did before. The Gemara begins, Nizkavein lizarok shtayim v'zarak arba. Now we're not talking about actually a rock on someone's lap. We're talking about throwing a rock or throwing an item. Really works for anything, as we pointed out many times. This is just an example. But again, Nizkavein lizarok shtayim v'zarak arba. Okay, we have, and again you see, L'inyan nizakin chayav. So again, what do we have before him? We have our new scenario right there. Before we get into each of these halachic topics. So again, there's our new scenario. And again, we see over and over again the same kind of thing. L'inyan nizakin chayav, l'inyan dal dvarim, l'inyan shabbat, l'inyan galut. And Li'inyan, where's Li'inyan Eved? Sorry, and Li'inyan Eved. Again, same new scenario, but same 5 halachic areas that we're trying to figure out what the halacha is in this new scenario. Okay, and again here, you see the 5 that are circled, the same 5 from last time. What you'll notice, though, that if you look at 4 out of the 5, okay, Li'inyan Nizakin Chayav tells us right away. what the halacha is. Linyan devarim patur, halacha right away. Okay, Linyan Shabbat mentioned Melechet Machshavah just like before. Linyan Eved, we have the same thing as before. Linyan Galut, we see something a little bit different. And that's what you need to pick on really for this unit of Gemara. And if you look there, we'll highlight just Linyan Galut here. If you see here Linyan Galut, we see the words Asher Lo Tzeidah. That should remind you, that's a quote from the pasuk that we saw earlier. So we see that whatever the halacha is going to be in terms of galut, does the person have to go to exile or not? Does the person have to go if they killed someone by accident in this new situation, which we'll see later? So in this scenario, we're going to see this pasuk Asher Lo Tzeidah about the person planning is going to play a big part in deciding what the halacha is. And just to wrap up our introduction, to get you thinking about this new Gemara before we actually see it inside, so I want you to take a look at the new scenario. Again, the new scenario is, I'll bracket it off again. It starts here, okay, ends at the bottom here. But here's our new scenario. Again, Nitkavein lizrok shtayim v'zarak arba. Now, what is this scenario? I'm going to tell it to you right now. Nitkavein means you had kavanah, you had intent. So what happens if a person nitkavein had kavanah, lizrok shtayim, to throw an object to, lizrok means to throw, shtayim is two. I had kavanah, an intention to throw an object to amot. Okay? So I knew what I was doing. I wanted to throw something to. What happened? Vizarak arba, but it turns out that I threw it four. It went a little bit farther than I expected. So what happens, now this makes the most sense on Shabbat, right? Where we're talking about amot. What happens if I wanted to throw something to amot, right, which would not have violated hotza'ah, the malacha, which requires four, but it turned out to go far enough that I violated Shabbat. So what happens when I have, what happens if I have intention to do an action, but I don't intend that the results be the way they are? The results turn out differently. That's really what we're talking about here. Where the action that I do is one that I intend, but the results of the action are different than what I intended. Here, what was my intention? Lizrok shtayim. I wanted to throw something, throw an object. Did I throw an object? Yes. Did I do what I wanted to do? Yes. What's the difference though? Vizarak arba. It went farther than I thought. The result was a little bit different. So what is the halacha in all of these areas of halacha? Shabbat, nezek, arba dorim, galut, eved. What's the halacha if I do something in a way where I wanted to do something, I wanted to throw something, I wanted to throw an object, but I didn't realize that it was going to be as forceful as it was? What should the halacha be? Again, if I had kavanah to throw something to amot and it went four, and the idea being, what happens when somebody intends to do an action but gets a result that they weren't expecting? With that, you should then fill out the rest of your notes. At least I shouldn't say that. You should look at page 4. Page 4 of your notes, you should fill in the scenario. Okay, like what I just said, fill in, based on what I just said, fill in the parts on the top, and then go through the chart, and again, try to figure out, based on this new scenario and the halacha we learned before, what should the halacha be in all these 5 areas of halacha. Please fill in the chart and then hand that back to me.